What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make this awesome miter sled for my brand new table saw. So let's get started. So we're going to start out this project with a sheet of 1/2-inch MDF. I think I picked this up at my local Home Depot for like 10 bucks, so pretty inexpensive. So here I am cutting these slides for the bottom of our crosscut sled. I'm making these out of hard maple for some added durability, and hardwood is just easier to work with than softwood. I cut these two thin strips of hard maple. These are going to go into our miter slots on our saw and act as spacers underneath of our actual slides. What this does is it raises up the slides about 1/8 of an inch off the table surface so we can put a little bit of CA glue on them to temporarily attach them to the MDF. And once you're done putting CA glue on, you can set your fence where you want it, and then you can very slowly drop down your piece of MDF on top of your slides. And I just held that for a couple of seconds until that CA glue could set up. And after a couple of minutes, that CA glue is fully dry, so we can very slowly and carefully pull our crosscut sled off of the saw. And once you pull it off of the saw, you can discard those little spacer strips that we cut. You're not going to be needing those anymore. Once that's done, I can start to pre-drill some holes in my slides so that we can permanently attach them with some small little 1/2-inch screws. It's very important that you use a countersink bit to countersink all of your screw holes. If you don't do this, the screw heads will stick out and then your crosscut sled won't be able to slide freely. Once all of your countersinks are done, you can grab some screws and start permanently attaching the slides to the MDF. I put 4 of them on each slide just to make sure that they don't go anywhere. It's very important that these slides do not move at all. It's the most important aspect of this crosscut sled. And you just want to make sure that your crosscut sled slides nice and free, but also doesn't have too much slop. Mine's good. Now I can turn my attention to the fence for the crosscut sled. I'm ripping this piece of MDF into 2 pieces that are 3 1/4 inches wide. So this is going to be the front fence, and this is going to be the back fence. So I brought those 2 sets of pieces down to the basement to do the glue up. It's too cold outside to do any glue ups, and my current shop doesn't have heat, so until my new shop gets built, I'll have to do all my glue ups in the basement. Anyway, I'm putting a lot of glue on this thing. I don't want it to move. I want to have a very good bond. Once I coat that entire thing with glue, I can put it into my clamps. And once that's dry, we can bring it over to the table saw to trim up both edges. And I did run one edge over my joiner and it worked just fine. So in case you're wondering, you can joint MDF. After you've made your fence, you can cut a slot into your miter sled. And that's going to be a reference point so we can make sure that this fence gets attached squarely. After my fence was made, I used a clamp to hold it into place without it moving. I could then get my drill and drill a single hole in one end. What we're going to do is put a single screw into that hole, and then we'll be able to pivot the fence into the perfect position to where it's 90 degrees with that cut that we made. I just used some 1 1/4 deck screws for this, but you can use anything that you have on hand. It doesn't really have to be fancy. So this big framing square came in super handy for this project. I could hold it tight up against my fence and continuously move the fence until that other side of the square was perfectly parallel with that cut that we made in our crosscut sled. Once I got my fence in the perfect position, I could once again use my clamp to hold it into place. Then I could grab my drill and start drilling pilot holes. I just started out with one on the end so I could get that clamp out of my way, and also that just allows me to have a little bit more flexibility if I have to move the fence once again. And so I just drilled my pilot hole, and then I went right back to my cheap deck screws and countersink bit to hold it into place. And here you can really see that cut we made with the table saw was not perfectly perpendicular with the front edge of our crosscut sled. Now we're going to test the accuracy of our crosscut sled. I just cut a scrap piece of MDF. What we're going to do, put that up against the fence on our crosscut sled. We're going to cut one edge off with the table saw. And then what we're going to do, we're going to take that edge that we just cut, put it up against the fence, and keep making cuts until we go all the way around our piece of scrap MDF. And basically the whole reason this works is because any error in your crosscut sled is going to be multiplied by 4 because you're cutting this thing 4 times, referencing off your last cut. And so what we're going to be doing is checking this angle right here for accuracy, and if that's off by a little bit, that is 4 times the error in your crosscut sled. So you can actually measure it and figure out how much you need to move it, but mine was perfect on the first try, which was really awesome. Now I'm going to turn my attention to this other piece of wood that we glued up. Again, just 2 pieces of 1/2-inch MDF. This is going to go in the front of our crosscut sled. It's just going to help hold everything together. So I drew a shape on it, and we're going to go over to the bandsaw and cut it out. And the blade that comes through my crosscut sled is not perfectly centered. I put it off to the right side on purpose because most of the time the wood's going to be on the left side and the scrap is going to be on the right. Now I can just use the little benchtop belt sander with an 80 grit sandpaper in it to smooth over all of those bandsaw marks and make it a little bit nicer to touch. And here you can really see how my blade is off-centered from my crosscut sled, and that's just because, again, the wood is usually off to the left and the scrap is off to the right. And now we can repeat the same process that we did for the front fence, although this one does not have to be accurate as it's not being referenced on anything, and you don't use it for anything other than support. So I just clamped it on and stuck some screws up from the bottom. And again, this does also help to hold the whole sled together and keep it nice and square. Applying a coat of paste wax to both of the runners on the bottom of the crosscut sled will help the whole thing slide just a little bit smoother on the table saw. I also screwed on this little block to the back of my crosscut sled for a little bit of added protection in case your hands are right back there. Guys, thank you so much for watching this week's video. I had a lot of fun making this miter sled, and as soon as I finished it, I was putting it right to use. I made these awesome pair of nightstands. These are for a customer who wanted them made locally, and I made both of those nightstands completely on this miter sled, and this thing is dead accurate. Like I said earlier, it's made out of 1/2-inch MDF, and I think MDF is an amazing material for shop projects because it takes a paint really well if you're going to paint it. It's also really easy to work with, and it's always very flat, and that's the most important thing when you're building something like this. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please leave those down in the comment section below. I'll try and answer those for you. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you go ahead and get subscribed. Also, be sure to hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my future uploads. Just hitting that subscribe button won't notify you whenever I post a video, so make sure you hit that little bell icon next to the subscribe button. Also, be sure to check out my website, www.sethscustomcreations.com. I've got a lot of different products on there, some more information about me, and some other information that you might be interested in. And lastly, be sure to follow me on Instagram, Seth's Custom Creations. I'll put the name on the screen there for you. I post a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff, and a lot of projects that aren't on my YouTube channel are over on my Instagram, so definitely be sure and give me a follow over on Instagram. I'll see you guys next week.